Well, there's a really interesting comparison there, which is that when Robert De Niro made King of Comedy, which I still think is the great De Niro-Scorsese collaboration, he studied comedians in order to get the rhythms of their performance right. But the thing about that film is that in the end, you get to see Rupert Pupkin's act, okay? And it's not very good, but it's not very bad. It's exactly as he would be. It's okay, but no better than that. And the performance of a comedian doing that's okay, but not very good is one of the things that is such genius about King of Comedy, because it would have been easier for him just to be very funny.
Or bomb completely.
But he doesn't. He's absolutely in that sweet spot between. So he does look like somebody who's been practicing that act but hasn't done it enough on stage, because he hasn't. He's just kind of blagged away. Incidentally, can I just say, a great interview. When you brought up that Child 3 does stand-up comedy, and you said it's one of the most terrifying things. I've told you this before, but I briefly did stand-up comedy when I was in Manchester, and I was doing it. I was like a musical thing. I had songs and, entertainment and blah, 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 blah. And my act was very, very particular. And I did it in Manchester 3 or 4 times to crowds who were completely on board. And I got to think that I was brilliant. And then I went to Hull and did a gig in Hull, at which they just thought, who is that guy? We've got absolutely no idea. We don't find any of this funny. And I got canned off stage.
Oh, dear.
Absolutely properly, somebody threw a plastic pint glass of beer at me. And that thing about, they'd actually spent the money on the beer, so they must have really wanted me to leave the stage.
It was beer. It was definitely beer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for raising the possibility that it wasn't, but I'm pretty sure it was beer. But it was that thing about, it's the most terrifying thing, because it's not, if you're on stage with a band and everyone hates you, it's fine. But if it's just you and there's nothing to hide behind, and it is pant-wettingly unpleasant.
Yeah. And if either of your parents had been there,
it would have been
they
worse.
Would have been absolutely done.
Wow. Okay, so onto the film. Quick recap, as you said, it is inspired by John Bishop's journey into comedy, although obviously the film itself doesn't, it's in a different country and different characters. So the story came to Will Arnett via a producer. He then worked on it with a co-writer, Mark Chappell, developed over 8 years, but then finally made in a hurry, directed by Bradley Cooper, who, as you pointed out, appears on screen wearing a hat indoors. So Arnett is Alex's father and husband. He's in the process of splitting up with his wife, Tess, played by Laura Dern, played rather brilliantly by Laura Dern. Almost by accident, he finds himself on stage at an open mic because he goes to a pub, he has to pay to get in. Somebody else gets in. He said, why is she getting free? Well, she's doing open mic. So he gets up on stage and he just starts telling his story about, I think I'm getting divorced. And it's tragic and dark, but people are laughing. And then he gets the bug. He starts to make waves in the stand-up world and make friends, and his act becomes ever more confessional, but he never tells Laura Dern's character. And she finds out because they're separated. She goes on a date with somebody else, and she goes to the club that he happens to be doing an open mic in, okay? So the whole thing about this having a relationship with a true story is it's because it's such a bizarre story anyway, isn't it? The idea, and when the question is, why doesn't he do therapy? And John Bishop said, well, that's not my world. That's not what I was. But obviously what is happening is that the standing up on stage in front of a room of strangers and talking honestly about what's happening to you is a form of therapy. I mean, that is basically group therapy. You just happen to be doing it in a comedy club. Also, John Bishop has said that in his case, him doing that stand-up enabled him to start having a conversation that he couldn't have had before because he just wasn't somebody who talked about any of that stuff. And that's kind of the arc of the film. That thing about having the comedy gives you nowhere to hide. And when you've got nowhere to hide, you start telling the truth because you've got nowhere else to go. And anyone who's done therapy will know about that moment when you suddenly realize you have no option but to say the actual true thing that you wouldn't want to say out loud because it's not very flattering to yourself. So, look, there are certain cinematic predecessors to this. There's the Bob Fosse film of Lenny with Dustin Hoffman, which is about Lenny Bruce, and who did, in the later stages of his career was basically using his stand-up to vent about all the things, the personal failures that he was bitter about. There's a film from 1989 called Punchline, which is Tom Hanks as a comedian and Sally Fields as a housewife who wants to become a comedian. He kind of helps her. And then there's that Judd Apatow film, which I keep forgetting about and then remembering about, which is Funny People with Adam Sandler. Do you remember that? And it's about a comedian who gets a terrible diagnosis and then tries to, kind of fix his life. They're all sort of in the same ballpark. And it was interesting that Will Arnett said doing stand-up comedy, exactly as you say, the thing about the difficulty of doing it not very well. And I was thinking of De Niro then. The thing about this film is it shouldn't work. It absolutely shouldn't work. It should be an indulgence. It should be something that doesn't make sense in the way in which they've told it, because they've transformed the whole story and taken it somewhere else. And the miracle of it is it does. And I think it does because, firstly, the performances are really great. I did believe in them. Mm-hmm. I believed in them as a couple who were having problems. I believed in the stand-up. And I think it was really interesting when John Bishop said that was the one thing that I felt I couldn't tell Bradley Cooper where to put a camera. I couldn't tell Bradley Cooper how to do an emotional scene, but I could insist that the stand-up actually seemed like stand-up. And I really enjoyed it, much to my surprise, because having had a sort of thumbnail sketch of what it was going to be, I thought, well, this isn't going to work. It's just going to. So I think the direction is unintrusive. And that's interesting because if you think about, I didn't like Maestro very much. Maestro felt very mannered, very orchestrated, very showy. This is very loose-limbed. It's very almost kind of, it's actually got a little bit of that kind of verite thing about it. And the cinematographer is Matthew Libatique, I think is how you pronounce it. Gives it kind of docudrama feel. I liked the characters. I believed in the characters. I believed in the stand-up. And I came out thinking, well, that was actually really, really good. And I confess that I had gone in feeling deeply suspicious about how this story, how it was all going to hang together. And it does. Did you like it?
Yes, I did. And I said so to Will and to John. And because you do believe in the comedy. I mean, that's why it was so painful to watch. Because because I have sat there. It's a very, very strange stand-up comedy. Is very weird,
terrifying. Well, the thing that John Bishop was saying is you're getting reviewed in real time. That literally they either laugh or they don't.
There's a reason that I enjoyed doing radio. It's because you can't see what people are thinking or hear what they're thinking.